She didn't even hesitate. I asked her who he was, and she sighed like I'd just asked something annoying, then said, "It meant nothing." No shaking voice. No tears. No panic. Just that flat sentence, like she was explaining a late Amazon delivery. I remember staring at her, waiting for the rest. An apology, a crack, some sign I mattered. It never came. She leaned back against the counter, arms crossed, calm, almost bored. I said, "You slept with someone else," and she shrugged. Shrugged. "You're overreacting," she added, like my reality was inconvenient. In that moment, something inside me dropped hard. Not anger. Not even sadness yet. Just a hollow certainty. This wasn't a mistake she regretted. This was a choice she'd already justified. I realized I was standing in front of someone who had already emotionally left. Someone who could reduce our marriage to nothing with a single word. And the worst part wasn't that she cheated. It was that she felt absolutely nothing saying it out loud. Before all of this, I would have told anyone we were solid. Not perfect, but stable in the quiet, adult way that felt earned. We had routines, shared jokes, long conversations that didn't need an audience. I trusted her without thinking about it, the way you trust gravity. We talked about the future like it was a given, not a question, vacations we hadn't taken yet, plans that assumed we'd still be standing side by side. I believed loyalty was implicit, something you didn't have to negotiate or defend. Looking back now, that confidence feels naive. At the time, though, nothing felt fragile. She laughed easily, reached for my hand in public, told me she appreciated how steady I was. I mistook familiarity for security. I didn't realize that while I was investing deeper, she was slowly detaching, learning how to live comfortably without me long before she ever touched someone else. The changes didn't arrive like alarms. They were small, quiet shifts that were easy to excuse in real time. She started guarding her phone, turning the screen down when I walked by, taking it with her even to the bathroom. Conversations became shorter, more surface level, like she was always somewhere else mentally. She laughed less at things we used to share, and when I asked what was wrong, she'd say she was just tired or stressed. I accepted that. I wanted to be understanding. Date nights got postponed, then forgotten. Physical closeness faded in ways I told myself were normal phases. I remember noticing how quickly she'd change the subject if I talked about us, or the future. It felt off, but not enough to confront. I kept choosing comfort over curiosity, trusting the version of her I remembered instead of paying attention to the person she was becoming right in front of me. There were moments that should have stopped me cold, but I worked hard to make them make sense. New, work friends I never met. Late nights that didn't line up with her job. A sudden obsession with privacy that felt defensive instead of healthy. When I asked questions, she'd smile tightly and say I was being paranoid, that not everything was about me. I swallowed that. I told myself trust meant giving space, not pressing for answers. Even when I caught inconsistencies in her stories, I blamed my own overthinking. I didn't want to be the suspicious husband, the insecure guy reading meaning into nothing. So I explained away every red flag as stress, independence, or growth. In hindsight, I wasn't being patient or mature. I was actively training myself not to see the truth because seeing it would have forced me to act. The first real crack came one night that should have been ordinary. We were sitting on the couch, the TV on, but neither of us watching, when I reached for her hand. She pulled away without thinking, like it was instinct. Not angry, not annoyed, just absent. I asked if I'd done something wrong, half joking, and she looked at me with a kind of confusion that stung more than anger would have. "Why do you always need reassurance?" she said. That word, always, hit me. It rewrote the moment, turned my question into a flaw. I remember feeling suddenly small, like I was intruding in my own marriage. Something in my chest tightened. I knew then that this wasn't just stress or a phase. There was distance there, deliberate and growing. And for the first time I wondered if I was the only one still trying to hold us together. Her words changed before her behavior ever fully did. She stopped saying we and started saying I without noticing. Plans became maybe instead of assumptions. When I talked about us, she responded like I was discussing something theoretical, not our actual marriage. Simple questions triggered defensiveness. Concern became pressure. Wanting clarity became control. She began framing my emotions as problems I needed to manage alone. "You're reading too much into it. You're being dramatic. Why can't you just be chill?" Her tone was calm, almost rehearsed, like she'd practiced minimizing me. Even affection sounded transactional, like something she gave only when it was convenient. I noticed how easily she dismissed serious conversations, how quickly she shut them down with language that made me feel unreasonable for even bringing them up. It was subtle, but it was consistent. Her words weren't just changing. They were creating distance, rewriting the rules so that my needs sounded excessive and her detachment sounded justified. By the time the affair actually happened, the emotional distance was already complete. We were sharing space, not a life. She was physically present but emotionally unreachable, moving through the house like a roommate on a different schedule. Conversations felt one-sided, like I was talking at her instead of with her. When I tried to reconnect, she treated it as an inconvenience, something she didn't have the energy for. There was no warmth, no curiosity, no effort to bridge the gap. Intimacy felt forced or absent entirely, and when it did happen, it was empty, like going through a checklist. I told myself this was what long marriages looked like sometimes. That closeness ebbed and flowed. What I didn't realize was that while I was mourning the distance and trying to fix it, she had already checked out emotionally. The affair didn't create the gap. It simply filled a space she had already abandoned. The lies weren't dramatic. That's what made them harder to challenge. They were small, casual statements that collapsed the moment you looked at them too closely. She'd say she was working late, but couldn't explain what she'd been working on. She'd mention people I'd never heard of, then get irritated when I asked follow-up questions. Timelines shifted. Details changed. When I pointed out inconsistencies, she accused me of keeping score. "Why are you interrogating me?" she'd say, turning my confusion into an attack. I started doubting my own memory, replaying conversations in my head to make sure I wasn't imagining things. The more the lies piled up, the calmer she became, like deception was effortless. What scared me wasn't just that she was lying. It was how easily she did it, how little weight the truth seemed to carry once it no longer served her. I didn't uncover it through some dramatic confession. I found it by accident, which somehow made it worse. A message popped up on her phone while it was charging next to me. His name, a familiarity that didn't belong there. I didn't go digging at first. I wanted an innocent explanation. But once the door cracked open, everything spilled out fast. Deleted messages. A second app. Photos that weren't meant for me. There it was, undeniable and painfully ordinary. No grand love story. No hesitation. Just proof that she'd been living a parallel life, while coming home to me like nothing had changed. My hands were shaking, my chest tight. But what hit hardest was the clarity. Every lie, every shift, every moment I doubted myself suddenly aligned. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I was married to someone who had been betraying me calmly, deliberately, and without guilt. I confronted her that same night. No build-up, no plan. I just held the phone out and asked her to explain what I was seeing. She didn't panic. She didn't grab the phone. She looked at it, then at me, and exhaled like this conversation was overdue. "Okay," she said quietly. That was it. No denial. No scrambling. I asked how long, and she gave me a vague answer that felt intentionally incomplete. When I asked why, she tilted her head and said, "You're making this bigger than it is." Every question I asked seemed to irritate her, not because I'd caught her, but because I was forcing her to deal with my reaction. I was shaking, barely holding it together, and she stayed eerily calm. That imbalance broke something in me. I wasn't confronting a remorseful partner. I was standing across from someone who had already decided my pain was an inconvenience she didn't want to manage. What shocked me wasn't what she admitted, but what she refused to feel. I asked her if she felt bad, if any part of this weighed on her at all. She looked genuinely confused by the question. "I don't see why I should," she said. It didn't mean anything. She said it again, slower this time, like I hadn't understood the first time. No guilt. No shame. Just dismissal. She framed it like a technicality, something separate from our marriage, something that shouldn't affect me this deeply. When I told her I was destroyed, she accused me of being dramatic. "You're overreacting," she said calmly. That was the moment I understood the real betrayal. Not the sex, not the lies. It was her absolute refusal to care about the damage she'd caused. She wasn't sorry. She was inconvenienced that I was hurt. After that conversation, everything inside me gave out at once. I didn't explode. I didn't yell. I went quiet in a way that scared me. My body felt heavy, like it was shutting down to protect itself. I remember sitting alone in the bedroom, staring at the wall, unable to process how someone I loved could watch me fall apart and feel nothing. My thoughts looped uncontrollably, every memory rewritten, every promise hollowed out. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. My chest hurt constantly, like grief had become physical. I kept replaying her words. It meant nothing. Over and over, trying to understand how our entire marriage could be reduced to that without consequence. I realized I wasn't just mourning the affair. I was mourning the person I thought she was, and the version of myself who believed he was loved. That realization crushed me harder than the betrayal itself. I don't remember making the decision all at once. It happened quietly, after watching her move through the days like nothing had changed. She wasn't trying to fix anything. She wasn't checking on me. She was already emotionally elsewhere while I was still bleeding. One night, I caught myself rehearsing sentences in my head, things I could say to finally make her understand, to force some sign of guilt. That was the moment it clicked. If I had to persuade my own wife to care, the marriage was already dead. I stopped asking questions. I stopped explaining my pain. I stopped waiting for remorse that wasn't coming. Not because I was suddenly strong, but because I was empty. Chasing her empathy was costing me my self-respect. Letting go felt terrifying, but also honest. For the first time since the betrayal, I chose to stop begging someone to feel something they clearly didn't. The distance after that wasn't dramatic. It was quiet and controlled. I stopped engaging, stopped reacting, stopped filling the silence she created. We spoke only when necessary, and even then it felt transactional. I no longer looked to her for comfort or validation. I could feel myself detaching emotionally, piece by piece, like a slow shutdown. She noticed the change, but didn't panic. If anything, she seemed relieved, like my withdrawal made things easier for her. That confirmed everything I needed to know. Someone who loves you feels the distance and tries to close it. Someone who doesn't simply adjusts. I started spending more time alone, not out of loneliness, but to regain clarity. The less I engaged, the clearer everything became. The fog lifted. I wasn't cold. I was protecting myself. Distance wasn't punishment. It was survival. The hardest lesson wasn't that she cheated. It was learning that betrayal without guilt is a different kind of loss. When someone looks at your pain and feels nothing, there's nothing left to repair. No explanation will fix that. No conversation will reach them. I spent too long trying to understand why, when the truth was already clear in how little it mattered to her. If someone cheats and minimizes it, dismisses it, tells you it meant nothing, believe them. That lack of remorse is the real ending. Love without empathy is emotional abandonment. Loyalty without accountability is meaningless. I didn't lose my marriage the day she slept with someone else. I lost it the moment she decided my pain wasn't worth caring about. Walking away wasn't giving up. It was choosing self-respect over begging someone to feel human.